Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden. And the Boston Celtics have taken a 2-0 lead in the NBA Finals. A much more competitive game tonight than Game 1, but a Boston win all the same. Logan, what is your biggest takeaway at this point from this game, from Boston taking this relatively commanding lead in the series?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been so surprised, Carson, at how they've been able to dictate so convincingly defensively, man, and all the big plays that they've managed to make. You go down to the wire here, and it's just huge defensive play after huge defensive play, man. Derek White has that transition block at the end. Tatum has a clutch, and he pokes the ball away from Kyrie Irving in a clutch possession where they need a bucket. Luka, there's a turnover off a Holiday ball pressure. Derek White steals the ball, leads to a Holiday catch and shoot three. I think in the third quarter, in the early fourth, KP has those consecutive chase down transition blocks on Gafford and PJ. I know they call one of them back, but it's just like one after another after another. In this game, they force 15 turnovers, and they convert those into 21 points off of turnovers. They notch 10 steals and 5 blocks. They hold Dallas to an offensive rating of 105.4. And I mentioned this stat last game. In Game 1, they hold them to 96.7. Dallas's offensive rating was the sixth lowest they totaled. A crazier stat from that game, they held them to 9 assists, Carson. I know we noted that. That was the lowest amount of assists any team had notched in any game this NBA season.
That's crazy.
Regular season or playoffs. And the biggest difference, too, is the fact that Boston was able to withstand a really poor shooting night from behind the arc. And that's what makes this a real tough pill to swallow for Dallas. Like, it just seems like they're overmatched. You have to win a game like this. You have to capitalize on it. Dallas was the number one three-point shooting team in terms of volume this season. They made the most, and they made them at the second best clip in all of the NBA. On the biggest stage, when a team is faltering at their, the thing that they succeed at more than any other team in the league, you got to capitalize on that. And they don't, man. In the first quarter, they shoot 1 of 9 from deep. In the first half, Boston shoots 3 of 15 from deep. And overall, they go 10 of 39 from deep. You just have to capitalize on that, man. And, Boston doesn't care about the other guys off ball for Dallas, right? They'll leave Derrick Jones Jr. alone. They'll leave PJ alone. They'll leave Josh Green alone. They'll leave everybody alone. Dallas can't afford to leave anybody alone, man. Any dribble penetration and kick out immediately puts this defense in rotation and gets them scrambling. You just got to win this game if you're Dallas, man. It's inexcusable. You have to capitalize on a poor shooting performance from Boston, and that's the reality of the situation. And it speaks volumes about the talent differential between these two teams, that Boston's able to win a really kind of ugly offensive game for them by their standards.
There's a big old talent gap here. Boston is just overwhelming in that respect compared to Dallas. And you see that even on their off nights offensively, as you say. In the first half of this game, Luka and Kyrie had 33 points. Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum had combined for 13. Boston was 3 of 15 from deep. So if you think about all of the boxes that you're trying to check if you're Dallas in terms of a Boston off night, potentially even a Boston meltdown, what is it? It's Tatum is really struggling as a shot maker, and their three-point shooting is just completely off. And Boston was up 3 at halftime of this game. And that's the point where you're just kind of like, I think we've crossed the threshold where it is just too clear that the gap in supporting casts is too significant for Dallas to overcome. And that's not to say that everything went perfectly for Dallas, because obviously it didn't. And as dominant as Luka especially was in the first half, but Kyrie was quite good in that first quarter, Kyrie then really was quite quiet in the second half of this game. And Luka relatively was much quieter in the second half of this game than he was in the first. Dallas also was super off in terms of their three-point shooting. So if you're a Mavs fan, you might point at all those things and say, okay, it's not like we played our A game either. And that's true. But specifically when it comes to the shooting aspect of it, the difference in Boston's off shooting night versus Dallas's is in your confidence in the shots that they're missing. We are talking about, for Boston, KP going 0 of 3 from deep on good looks. Sam Hauser going 0 of 5. Jayson Tatum missing not just pull-up threes, but like several wide open catch and shoot looks where the ball is swung over to him. Same goes for Jaylen Brown. Like, these are really good three-point shooters who are missing shots that they are normally going to be quite good at. When you look at Dallas's off shooting night, Luka was really good with all of his shot making, but from beyond the arc as well, it's PJ Washington going cold, which is always liable to happen. It's Derrick Jones Jr., Maxi Kleba, Josh Green. These guys combining to go 0 of 8 from deep, and not just from deep, overwhelmingly on above the break threes, the exact sort of shots that Boston wants you taking. That's where there is just a pronounced difference in the off shooting nights between these two teams. And so even those things going wrong for Boston, it just wasn't enough. And honestly, you never really felt like Dallas was going to win this basketball game. These are just two teams that were built in dramatically different ways, Logan, and we are very much seeing the reality of that. And I know there were a lot of people coming into this series who believed in the value of having clearly the best player on the floor in Luka Doncic for Dallas. Coming into this series, you would have thought 2 of the 3 best players, certainly 2 of the 3 best offensive players with Luka and Kyrie. Kyrie hasn't played up to that level, which is one thing. But the other thing is that as valuable as that sort of star power is in terms of the historical precedent, you just don't see teams like Boston. You just don't see teams that have 5 top 50 players, as we've talked about, maybe the most complete starting 5 that we've seen in 40 plus years in this league. When you think about how these teams made their moves to fill things out over the last year, what was it for Boston, Logan? It was trading for Kristaps Porzingis coming off of a career season, clearly a star level player. It's trading for Drew Holiday, who was viewed as a star level player and was arguably their best player in this game, was absolutely massive. Dallas has done an awesome job of building out their roster, but what are they doing? They're signing Derrick Jones Jr. on the minimum. They're picking Derek Lively, 12th overall. They're seeing what they can do to use their assets that consist of Grant Williams and 2 first-round picks way down the line to get PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford from 2 of the worst teams in basketball. They did a really good job putting themselves in a position to be here, but those are 2 entirely different paths, and they should lead to entirely different expectations. That's not in any way to take away from Boston because they're a great, great basketball team. It's more just a reflection on how people viewed this series coming into it, because there is such a gap in supporting cast that, yeah, of course it's going to make more of a difference in this series than normal, because we're talking about dudes who were picked up off the scrap heap and have absolutely overperformed, but are all legitimately flawed in their own ways, versus dudes who are star level basketball players. Boston has 5 of those dudes, and it's just exceedingly difficult for me to see Dallas overcoming that.
Yeah, and coming into this series, I know you made the take that the Celtics were underrated, and I think that's exactly what happened. You're talking about the places they came from. Boston was already a championship-level contender that just had underachieved over the past few seasons. And what did you do to that? You added 2 of the best complementary guys in basketball who, are at this stage in their careers just committed to winning. I mean, that's the goal. Kristaps Porzingis is coming from one of the worst organizations in sports, the Washington Wizards. Drew Holiday won a title. He knows what it takes, and those guys have committed to that. But it's a great point. The Mavericks didn't make the playoffs last year and had to have a dramatic midseason turnaround. This isn't to take away anything from either of these basketball teams, but yeah, and I think it swung too far in the other direction, man, where the reputation of the Boston Celtics seemed to, supersede. Thank you for...
And you weren't a part of that, were you, Logan?
Oh, yeah. Dude, I told you right before the show started, man, the Boston Celtics, I love doing this, man, and they make me eat a big old piece of humble pie, it seems like, every time I come on here, man, and they proved that tonight. It is a testament to this group top to bottom. And I want to hit on another big key thing that you're talking about with the defense, right? Nobody else in basketball has the luxury of this many, not only great players, but great defenders that can, one, match up against any of these guys in one-on-one context, but also Boston has the luxury of playing off Luka a little more. And it's not as dramatic as Oklahoma City was doing, where they were blitzing and sending 2 guys every single time at the ball. They can help off a little bit. And the Dallas guys just can't punish them enough, right? Derrick Jones Jr. can't hit enough threes. PJ can't hit enough threes. PJ created a little more for himself, but can't create enough off of the advantages. And right, because with Oklahoma City, it's 3 guys getting out of position and diverting their attention to Luka. With Boston, it's 2 tops every time.
It's the difference between blitzing and just helping off of bad shooters.
Yeah, and we're clearly seeing that PJ and Derrick Jones Jr. are really struggling when they aren't just spoon-fed, really easy, wide-open looks that are completely uncontested because of the blitz. And that was a huge reason why, Dallas was able to get through the first 3 rounds of these playoffs. When the defense doesn't have to do that to slow down Luka Doncic, well, we're seeing that there's just a huge gap in the supporting cast, man. And when you get this out of Kyrie, it's like, damn, it just really feels like Dallas doesn't have a chance. And I said this after the first show, but to eke out a win, to barely win, like in this game, Dallas is going to have to play perfect basketball. And the reality is Boston doesn't to win games. They can play a mediocre Boston Celtics basketball game and they can win. That's not what this is, but I'm just saying on average, Dallas is going to have to play damn near flawless basketball to win one game, to eke out a victory. And Boston, for the most part, can coast a little bit more. And it just speaks to the massive, massive talent discrepancy. And I'm a victim of that too, man. I thought it was going to matter more. I thought the gap between Luka was going to be more massive between him and Tatum and the rest of this group. The collective has picked up the slack and where, Tatum has left them short. And Kyrie hasn't been as good enough as he's needed to be. But there's a huge, huge gap between these two teams. And that's what we've seen through 2 games.
And you talk about Boston not necessarily playing their best. I think that the shooting is the clearest reflection. But to me, it's more about the difference between the stars. What did I say, Logan? I said, viewing this series as Luka versus Tatum is the silliest possible way to view this series. And I think that Tatum had an interesting performance in this one. I think he did some things very well. I think he did some other things very poorly. But the reality is Jrue Holiday's your best basketball player in this game. And he did such a phenomenal job of providing offensive value, even when this was an off shooting night for everybody from Boston. He actually shot okay from beyond the arc, but not at any sort of high volume. He was extremely efficient in the paint and just has such phenomenal feel offensively. His cutting off of Jayson Tatum when he drew a second defender was excellent. He is legitimately really good in the dunker spot. And we saw some of that in game 1 as well. Boston just has such versatility with how they can space things. The versatility of every player in this offense, every guy essentially can fill multiple roles. You see it with Jrue Holiday, his patience, his willingness to deal with physicality down low as a finisher. He's constantly catch ready. Derek White is pretty good there too. He's not quite as comfortable finishing around the rim, but he can get to those sort of short range jumpers. That's a crazy weapon to have from your guards when your wings are drawing extra attention downhill as drivers. His closeout attacking was phenomenal in this game. Just so aware of these hard closeouts and saying, I'm not going to force a shot, which we know can be an issue for the Boston Celtics historically, right? Those sort of quick, rushed catch and shoot threes, as good as they are, there's a difference between a good look from deep and a forced one. And he didn't force any. He was getting down to the rim. He was beating Luka when he wasn't rotated over quickly enough. He had a really nice finish over Daniel Gafford. He ran the floor in transition, got a couple easy buckets there. And what he does attacking the offensive glass is so valuable. He has 4 offensive rebounds in this game, Logan, 11 rebounds overall. He's had a career rebounding season, but he was the number 2 offensive rebounding point guard this regular season. He's the number 1 offensive rebounding point guard in this postseason. He's getting like 2 offensive boards a game. And then he's always going to make the extra pass offensively. Like, he just does so many winning things. It isn't always going to show up on the stat sheet like it did tonight. He isn't always going to be as involved as he was tonight. But like, we're talking about him getting you an extremely efficient 26 points, almost none of it self-created, so consistently attacking within the flow of the offense. All of this while he's serving as the primary Kyrie defender. And we know he's an all defense level guy. Like, that is his calling card. It's been really awesome to see him recast into a different role offensively, where in Milwaukee, he had to be basically your number 2. He and Middleton could trade off nights, but then you have the 2022 run, for example, where Chris Middleton isn't even out there. Like, there was just too much of a burden on him. Giannis's limitations as a clutch creator also made him like at sometimes your de facto offensive number 1 in those clutch situations. And it was just too labored. It was too inefficient for him when he is allowed to just weaponize his elite pure catch and shooting and all of this stuff that he does, cutting, finishing around the rim, his post up play. We even see at times being this big guard at 6'4". You just get all of these connective benefits out of him. And he's really thriving. So we talk about the different paths in terms of team building. KP is the deal that you look at and you just think about the value and you're like, oh my God, that was a highway robbery. Boston had to pay a decent price for Jrue Holiday, but it was absolutely worth it. When you are in this position, when you have been to the NBA finals and you've been to a handful of conference finals, it is about making the moves that will put you over the top. It is absolutely about committing to adding those sort of win now impact guys. And Drew Holiday is the epitome of a winning basketball player, especially in this role. And I do want to give props to his backcourt mate, Derek White, as well, because it feels like collectively they're sort of the stars of the night. Game one, it was all about KP, what he came in and did with his mismatch attacking and shooting and rim protection. This game, it's about Drew Holiday and Derek White, and it's not just their raw production. Some of the plays they make down the stretch, Logan, you mentioned a number of key defensive plays from Boston. So many of those are generated by these two. You have the Derek White steal after Drew Holiday forces a deflection and sort of throws things into chaos a bit. And then what does he do? He finds Drew Holiday for an open three. Then you have Drew Holiday making an effort play, getting an offensive board, finds Derek White for an open three. That gets this lead up to 13. And at that point, I was kind of like, all right, this thing's over and done with. Boston finally hit a couple threes. This is a 13-point lead with just a few minutes left. But then Dallas is actually able to cut the deficit just down to 5. Jayson Tatum dicks around a little bit offensively, and they just leave some empty possessions on the board. And it's Derek White who seals it with the insane transition block on PJ Washington as the best shot blocking guard in the league. That's just what he does. So they're two players who epitomize winning basketball, and they are unselfish to their cores. It doesn't need to be a big scoring night from any one of them. They're legitimately one of the best backcourts in basketball because of the elite defensive impact, the elite shooting, the connective playmaking. They're one of the best backcourts in basketball, and they're the 4th and 5th best players on their own team, Logan. They combined for 44 points, 16 rebounds, and 7 stocks in this game. That's just unfair, and that's the difference. KP can be your hero in game 1. These two can be your hero in game 2. Like, they just have an advantage in that way that Dallas could only dream of, and that's kind of the story of this game.
Exactly. And you can get mad at Boston for it. You can be mad at the abundance of talent that they have, but
maybe you.
Yeah, maybe me. Maybe me. I kind of dislike the Boston Celtics heavily. That's it. Any one of these guys can be their best player in an individual basketball game. Not many basketball teams can say that, right? You look over at Dallas. If Luka is not the unequivocally, best player on the court, if he is not the best player on the court, the Mavs have no chance of winning. PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. are not just magically going to be the best player on the court in a game for the Dallas Mavericks, right? It's either going to be
I think you probably looked at Kyrie Irving.
Or it's going to be Kyrie,
guys.
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Those are the 4th and 5th guys for Dallas.
Right.
There's such a large discrepancy. Now, when we are talking about hierarchy, Carson, I think there's an interesting narrative that's been going on recently, especially after Jason Kidd's comments. I am the first guy that is going to, push back on Jayson Tatum being crowned as like one of the 5 best players in basketball. I really think the Jayson Tatum pendulum has swung way too far in the other direction. Like, I was really surprised at the Brown over Tatum narrative developing after game 1. We discussed on our show, is Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum the better scorer? And I thought that was a really good discourse. I thought that was the logical route to go. Everybody else kind of jumped the horse and said they took it a step further because Jason Kidd came out and said that Jaylen's their best player. I don't know if it was an attempt to cause dissension or if that's just what Jason Kidd thinks. Whatever. Everybody kind of took the bait and ran with that. And I do think that Jaylen Brown's their better scorer. I had that take. I think he's been more consistent in these playoffs. I think he's been more aggressive. I prefer Brown getting downhill to Tatum's reliance on the perimeter, but we have gone way too far in the other direction, man. People are saying he's nowhere close to top 5. He's not top 10. And Tatum's not perfect in this game. In this series overall, he's 17 points, 10 rebounds, and 8.5 assists a night on 12 of 38 from the field. That's 32% overall. And he's 4 of 14 from deep. He's just under 29% from deep with 9 turnovers. He's not been great offensively, but everybody has been so quick, Carson, to actually call Jayson Tatum a complete bozo. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's gotten slanderous. It's libel, man. Look, man, I want to clown on Jayson Tatum too, but you guys are taking it too far. It's not even fun anymore. I have to be rational with this, man. Look, he didn't score well. He's missing open threes. He is missing point-blank layups. He has been uncharacteristically bad protecting the basketball. All of these things are true. And there is something, Carson, about Tatum and the lights, and I do worry about him. Like, I wonder if the pressure of big games gets to him. I wonder if that is just a fundamental characteristic and part of the Jayson Tatum experience. We have a big enough sample size to wonder that. But I'm not just going to, completely overlook all of the great things that he does for this Boston Celtics team. He does so many little things, that are just separate from just scoring the basketball and putting it in the basket. He's constantly creating downhill pressure. I thought Jaylen Brown and Tatum abused Luka on defense, and anybody really that got in their way. It was easy. It was just easy for these two to get downhill. And guess what? Tatum's shot wasn't hitting, so he started getting downhill. Great. Thank you. He was playmaking his ass off. You talk about when Holiday cut, that's just chemistry, man. These two guys are on the same wavelength, and it was beautiful. He's got the one where he draws the double and Holiday comes in. He's got another one where he just feeds a pinpoint pass to cutting Holiday between two defenders. But he was consistently making great decisions. He provided elite defense and rebounding. And I just don't want to overlook all of the great things that Tatum is doing because he had another bad night shooting from the field. Like, we're just going too far with this, man. I don't know what's next. Like, is Jaylen Brown a top 10 player all of a sudden?
News clears.
Is Tatum not top 20? Is he not top 20? Like, how long are we going to go, man? Can we find a common ground? Like, I just I don't want to be the guy defending Jayson Tatum, but we've just gone way too far, man. We have gone way too far with the Tatum slander.
That's very big of you, Logan, because I know how you feel about Jayson Tatum. The discourse surrounding him is going to be pretty difficult to stomach, I would imagine, if things continue as they are. And he is a really interesting superstar. And the reason for that is that there is an offensive inconsistency with him that you don't see from almost any other top 10 player. There's also the lack of an A+ trait with him that is pretty rare among these absolute superstars. And so that lends itself to some of these offensive off nights where you can just kind of look at yourself and say, okay, how does he stack up to these other guys? Within the context of this performance, his playmaking was legitimately excellent. And he has been the best of his career this year in that respect. And I think has had a really nice postseason overall. And he's consistently, as you say, getting downhill in the important stretches of this game, not necessarily to score, but putting the defense in rotation and specifically targeting Luka Doncic, man, like just absolutely burning him over and over again. And then he's making these laydown passes. He's consistently making kickouts. He's not going to wow you, right? He's not going to make the sort of supernatural reads that we see from the league's elite playmakers, but he is doing his job. He is creating good shots for his teammates pretty consistently. And of course, on the other side of the ball, and defensive impact is pretty much always going to be underrated when we talk about NBA stars, NBA players in general. It's just not nearly as appreciated as, ooh, look at how cool that bucket was. Understandably so. But he's the guy who enables their entire defensive scheme. The ability of him to guard the fives, to hold up against them on the glass, and to also switch on to Luka Doncic and still be a quite good option guarding him, like that has prevented these lobs being spoon-fed to Lively and Gafford that we normally see. That has enabled Boston to not have to sell out with these blitzes that we see. The couple spots when they do send two to the ball on Luka or Kyrie, they are actually allowing very easy shots for their teammates. Like, it is Jayson Tatum and his versatility that has allowed Boston in many ways to defend Dallas so effectively. He's been their best defensive rebounder this entire postseason. He's been great there in this series, but his shot making has been very off, like very off. He has been very inefficient as a scorer through 2 games, and his finishing could absolutely be better. Like, we're talking about some points left on the board in the paint around the rim as well. And in the fourth quarter of this game, Logan, I mentioned him dicking around earlier. Like, you get some bad Jayson Tatum misses. He goes 1 of 7 in the fourth quarter, and particularly what frustrated me is I love Tatum getting downhill, and I like him being aggressive. I like him trying to draw fouls. I just thought there were a couple spots where there was a rim protector clearly in position to just defend him vertically, and he just kind of was trying to punch on people, and he got met at the rim, and so those kind of feel like wasted possessions. But he's going to be inconsistent offensively. He had 6 boneheaded turnovers in game 1. Like, this is just the Jayson Tatum experience, and it makes him the hardest NBA player to talk about because he exists in such a fascinating space where he is this very complete superstar, but he's kind of the B plus at a lot of things superstar, right? He doesn't have that A plus trait, and he is more inconsistent as a scorer and offensive player. So he inherently does stuff that's underappreciated when he's off as a scorer, the rebounding, the defensive versatility, the playmaking in a series like this. And those performances get underrated. But then at the same time, you have the fact that he is the best player for the Boston Celtics, and he is the front man of a historically talented basketball team, a basketball team that is topping some of the all-time charts in net rating and point differential, and very likely is going to march their way to an NBA title this year. And because we have such a tendency to conflate best player with that team's greatness, we have such a tendency to conflate team result with individual impact, that makes him overrated at times. I saw a tweet today, which is so ridiculous, but when something has like 6,000 likes or whatever, you can't just write it off and say, oh, nobody actually thinks this. And the guy said, Jayson Tatum is going to have such a Steph Curry-esque career in the sense that nobody appreciates him as the best player alive in any moment, but then you look back and you just go, wow, he's a top 12 to top 15 player ever. And that's where I'm just like, what are we talking about? Because there very clearly is a delineation between him and the top 5 guys who concretely to me are Jokic, Giannis, Luka, Embiid, and SGA in terms of the offensive dominance and the offensive consistency, right? Those guys do have their overwhelming traits that just present them with a floor on that side of the ball that Tatum just doesn't approach. And so you can take him out of those conversations. The Celtics being so great doesn't put him in there. But at any point after that, he's somewhere in that range. I said coming into the playoffs, I had him as my number 9 player. If he had a really good final series, I said I could see him all the way up to number 6. He's somewhere in that range. So to put him on either side of the spectrum beyond that to me is just wrong. But unfortunately, I feel like that's where a significant portion of people actually lie when it comes to Jayson Tatum. Like, he is so polarizing, and his offensive inconsistency is frustrating, but his defensive impact, his versatility, his rebounding, like that does provide a floor there. So I think most people just end up getting Jayson Tatum wrong in one way or the other, and it lends itself to very, very dumb discourse. I just think this is who he is, and that's not to say that he is going to shoot 6 of 22 going forward. To be clear, he absolutely can play better. He could have some legitimately awesome offensive games down the stretch, but you do know there's always the possibility of this, and there's the possibility it happens in back-to-back games, which isn't the case for the dudes who some people try to compare him to. We should just all come to terms with that. We should come to terms with Jayson Tatum is a top 10 player. Jayson Tatum is on an amazing basketball team. He does a bunch of stuff that allows him to impact the game at a high level when he isn't dominating offensively and as a scorer, but he also has an inconsistency there that we have to acknowledge because it's real.
And I think the Celtics front office realized that too. It's a big component of why you add Holiday and Porzingis to alleviate some of that pressure. I think they recognized, all right, man, maybe this guy can't carry the load of an offense the way we need him to. Let's get him even more help. And the one area I really do want to give Tatum credit for growing in is as a playmaker. I mean, he really collapsed and fell apart. He didn't score well in his last finals, but the biggest pitfall of Tatum was his inability to make good decisions and play make and, just even like bear the load as a number 1 guy creating offensively. And he's completely blossomed there. That has been a huge part of the growth in his game. And so I always think he's going to be inconsistent as a shooter, but that is real tangible growth. And again, with a team this talented, his skill set lends itself to still playing winning basketball because of that. And another thing I want to hit on, I'm waiting for Tatum to have the breakthrough game in these finals where he is knocking down everything. Because the thing that I keep coming back to with all of this Tatum tape from game 1 and game 2 is that he's getting to great looks. Like, all of his shots are basically open threes that he's either creating off of the dribble or off the catch, and he's just missing them, or they're layups right at the rim where, again, he's like rimming out. And I know it's got to be frustrating for him. It's frustrating for all of us, but they're going to fall at some point. Like, it's going to balance out. And I know that Tatum is just waiting also for it to happen. And so, yeah, man, I just think discourse around Tatum has gotten really dumb. And I don't know, man. It's the most frustrating thing, I think, in basketball right now. And I didn't really see this coming, and I think you make the perfect comp. Like, if you take Tatum out of this situation, he's not going to be as impactful as these other guys that carry bigger loads. Again, that doesn't mean that we should just wipe away all the other great things he does on the basketball court, man. He's a complete basketball player, and he impacts every facet of the game.
Absolutely.
And it's gotten really toxic around discourse, man. And I want to settle this and put this one to bed.
I appreciate you taking that stance with Jayson Tatum. I do think overall he's probably getting more hate than deserved right now because of what we talk about, because of what basketball fans tend to notice and appreciate. And that's not what he has done in this series. But there is an expectation if you're going to be held to, okay, yeah, this guy is one of the generational talents. This guy could be the number one on any number of teams and they would win the title. Like, he's in a privileged situation where there is so much shot making around him that he doesn't have to be that dude as a shot maker and a scorer every night. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to acknowledge that and understand that, because the Celtics are different from the historical precedent and that they are probably going to win the title without a top 5 basketball player. That normally doesn't happen. But the response to that shouldn't be, oh, because they won the title, Jayson Tatum is top 5. Maybe it's just, hey, this is an exceptionally talented basketball team, one of the best that we've ever seen in that respect. Let's appreciate what Tatum does, but let's not get silly, goofy, irrational about it in either direction. I do want to give some props to Jaylen Brown as well, because I thought this was another game where he got downhill. He, again, defended well. He made some really nice kick out passes. He had a few too many turnovers, but overall it was a good showing, and he was also putting the defense into rotation and had more of an impact maybe than the raw box score, the raw scoring numbers would indicate. But really what stands out to me is just Boston's consistent ability to exploit these Dallas switches and the inability of Dallas to keep them from creating this dribble penetration and to keep them from creating these great spot up looks for their awesome shooters. We talked about what Jayson Tatum was doing to Luka Doncic, just so consistently, easily getting by him off the bounce. And Boston has been able to accomplish what Minnesota just couldn't, and that is really target Luka on the defensive end and really make him pay. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, there's just more dudes on Boston who are so skilled offensively and are athletic enough to actually target Luka. But more than that, to me, it is about the comfort that you have with their playmaking and their spacing and the level of aggregate offensive skill. Because, and we saw, if he got that switch with Luka, well, the paint was going to be loaded up, right? He was going to see help. So it's not like he was just going to beat him off the bounce and then yeehaw, I'm getting an open look around the rim. That wasn't the reality. He was going to have to make the necessary reads as a playmaker, and the dudes around him were going to need to knock down shots. And Tatum has just been better as a playmaker. And even though Boston wasn't making a lot of those open threes tonight, they end up making enough of them. And their shot quality is so good that you feel like over the course of the series, like, things are just going to get a lot better for them offensively than they were in this one. So that's just what's great about this Boston offense. They have so many ways to attack. They're so complete. And most teams can't punish these mismatches in the way that Boston is built to. Like, nobody or hardly anybody has a dude like KP who is that exceptional attacking mismatches. He was the most efficient post scorer in basketball this year. So game one, you see it in this game, even though he doesn't play that much, and then he leaves this game hobbled. But there are several spots where he gets that Kyrie switch. That's just an automatic bucket for him. Daniel Gafford also is struggling to contain these dudes off the bounce off of some of these switches. So Dallas has just been able to trust their guys to defend well enough in space, and then to trust the backline defense to help and to take away those easy looks around the rim. And Boston is just so great at shooting that, as we anticipated, they have been a really difficult counter in that way.
Well, Dallas has been able to load up the paint and really settle, right, and dictate and win on that side. With Boston spacing, you just can't have it. Like, you get that initial dribble penetration from Tatum or Jaylen Brown, whoever it may be, and then it's like the house is on fire. You know, it's going to be a swing, open three. It's going to be really tough, man, because it's a good contrast to what Dallas wants to do defensively, man. And I think that's an interesting part. Dallas won on the defensive side of the ball. Like, that's why this team was really good. Like, Luka and Kyrie were going crazy offensively. You know, PJ and Derrick Jones Jr. were giving you whatever. They won on that side of the ball. And I think that's a common theme for a lot of the teams that we're deep into these playoffs. Outside Indiana, Boston won defensively. Minnesota won defensively. Dallas won defensively, and then they got enough offense, right? Dallas can't win defensively against Boston. And that's a conclusion I'm reaching. Like, there's too much shooting. There's too many guys who can put the rock on the floor. And Luka, I feel for Luka a little bit just because of the offensive load that he has to take on, and then the fact that they're going at him. Luka's injured and got this huge responsibility offensively. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to stop anybody. Like, there's moments, right, where he can put a body on somebody, but he got cooked in this one. I also want to give props, dude. That monster dunk that Jaylen Brown had in transition, where he had that crossover on Luka, that was just gnarly. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Boston's collective and what they did on the glass, too. This is a really, like, minute detail, but Boston's ability to just put a body on somebody, and, like, all of these guys are such great winners. Brown, Tatum, Holiday, man, White. There's such a commitment to doing all of the little things. And one of those little things, man, is just tagging a guy on the glass. Dallas hasn't been able to win defensively against Boston. They also haven't been able to win on the glass. I know that Lively and Gafford get theirs statistically, like on the rebounds, but when they wanted to, Boston was dictating that too. Like, they just have so many guys that crash and go all out. I was impressed with their effort there. Dallas seems outmatched, man. Dallas seems really outmatched, and I don't know, man. I don't want to see a sweep. That feels like what's lurking around the corner, Carson.
Interesting. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I just think sweeps are generally pretty tough to pull off against very good basketball teams. And as commanding as this 2-0 lead may feel right now, you just held serve if you're Boston. And I don't think that we have an update on KP. Like, it didn't look bad. I would presume that he's going to play, stayed on the court for a couple more minutes, but he was clearly hobbled and he didn't return to the game after he came up hobbling, whatever that was with his leg. That would potentially open a door for Dallas. So I wouldn't go as far as to say sweep or whatever, but the path to them, again, now you have to win 4 out of 5. Like, that path is crazy, crazy long to me. So we will talk about that on the other half of a break. What went wrong for Dallas? What needs to go better going forward after some quick words from DraftKings. We are this close to crowning an NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered every step of the way with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out as the NBA postseason winds down.
It's super easy to get started with DraftKings if you're a first-timer. Try betting on something like a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your bet. It's that simple. And if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So, Logan, when we look at this Dallas performance, first thing that stands out is that Luka got his, and he, in terms of the box score, has a pretty strong performance, and in that first half was really quite dominant offensively. What did you make of his performance?
I thought it was a masterful performance. I know he ends up getting the 8 turnovers. And shout out to Boston for being really opportune with when they, blitzed him and stuff. Pritchard has one where he's creeping up behind him. There's other ones where there's a little cheeky double team and he ends up getting the ball poked loose. It was great, though. I mean, 32-11-11 on 12 of 21 from the field, 4 of 9 from behind the arc. They flashed some of these stats up during the broadcast, but he's got the most points per game following a loss in NBA playoff history, more than Michael Jordan. In first quarters after a loss, he was averaging 13 points per game on 60-50 splits in these playoffs. He, again, notches 13 points in this one. In the first half, he gives you 23. I want to give him a shout-out for his just exquisite passing, man. The passing in this game was phenomenal. There's one where he's doubled in the corner. He has a crazy kick out to PJ where PJ can't make the defense pay. And that's what some of this is frustrating, man. Luka's diming these guys up, where these are like all-time highlights, and they're not hidden shots. He's got a no-look kick to Josh Green. He misses a corner 3. Some of them do convert. He's got that nice dump off to Derrick Jones Jr., but just so many. The one that really stuck out to me too was he's matched up with Horford on the elbow or on the wing near the end of the shot clock, and he hits PJ cutting around the free throw line, like off of a shot. So many great passes, killing guys out in isolation, shooting over the tops of guys. Luka did get his, and ultimately guys can't punish him enough for his gravity. But I thought it was encouraging the way he was able to play make after game one, only not just one assist there. I think that has more to do with his teammates not converting than anything else, but he's able to be weaponized more as a playmaker in this one. It was a really good game, man. And he's just got such an insane burden on his shoulders. Maybe he could have executed a little better in the fourth quarter, but that's kind of the only area where, I felt like Luka left us short. This is a all-time offensive performance from one of the game's great offensive players.
Wow. All-time. Let's settle down.
He's still got a huge burden on his shoulders, man. He's not getting anything from Kyrie.
Very good.
It is really good. The 8 turnovers is problematic, but everything else Luka gives you, you'll take. And I don't mind those, man. When everybody else is struggling so much, like I understand Luka trying to put the entire team on his back, man. He's a monster.
Well, I just think all time is too strong an adjective. He was off to a crazy, crazy start to this game, like extremely dominant, and was just cooking every individual matchup to a different level than what we saw in game one, where like as a scorer, he was relatively successful, but wasn't like crazy efficient. And when you consider how much they were able to limit him as a playmaker, that was a successful game plan overall for Boston. This game was different. He was just too big for Derek White. He was bullying him. The mid-range shot making was incredible, over the top. He was too shifty for Jayson Tatum, was consistently getting by him off the bounce. And even when he was really well defended by anybody, like his pull-up shooting was just out of this world. But the key for Boston that I'm very glad that they realized and they primarily stuck with is that you just have to live with that. Largely. Now, they did get a little bit more aggressive, sending 2 defenders to him in some spots, but I thought, as you say, they were selective with that and generally had the element of surprise working to their advantage in some way, or you just had some dudes make some really good defensive plays for them, like when KP is showing high while Tatum is still recovering and Luka tries to get that behind the back pass out to PJ and Tatum picks it off. I thought they had a very smart blitz with KP when the shot clock was winding down and he was on Lively. So that's a spot where you absolutely want to force the ball out of Luka's hands, because it's like, okay, Lively, catch the ball at the free throw line with 3 seconds on the shot clock. That's not a good spot for the Dallas offense to be in. So they did send 2 defenders his way some more, but when they were doing any sort of like conventional, predictable sending 2 to the ball, like that's where you start getting these wide open looks for his teammates, lob for Derrick Jones Jr., wide open dunk for Derek Lively, that we just hadn't seen. So I want to give them props for not over committing to Luka and being smart about when they did bring 2, because the reality is you are just better off with Luka having to take 25, 30 shots, all of them working in single coverage, a lot of them difficult, then you are allowing these wide open, extremely high value shots for his teammates. And then he ultimately did hurt them with the turnovers, 8 of them. And I thought that Boston did a really nice job of bringing pressure, and they brought some physicality in some spots that I think forced him to turn the ball over. You have another spot where KP is a deterrent, trips him up, forces him to travel, but he does go 1 of 6 in the fourth quarter. So this was a really, really good Luka game. And overall, if we're doing blame pie for Dallas, he is a very small part of it because of how much Kyrie struggled, because of the offensive limitations of his whole supporting cast. But he was bad defensively, and down the stretch, like he did struggle, and he didn't get anything easy in this game. So if you're Boston, you're fine with that. You know that he's going to be the best player on the floor. You know that he's going to be the best scorer on the floor. And they did allow him to get his teammates going more in this game, just out of necessity. Again, they had to dedicate some more attention to him in these spots. But overall, like this wasn't enough on its own to fuel Dallas to a win. That's not to say that Luka didn't do enough. That's just to say that with the other limitations of this roster, it wasn't enough. And I think that's where you look at Kyrie more than anybody else, because he has to be way better going forward. And that's where, when we talk about how it's like Dallas has to win this one because Boston is off in terms of their 3-point shooting and Tatum is off, the reality is to cash in on that sort of off night, you probably just need Kyrie to be really, really good. You probably need not just Luka to be really good offensively. You need both them. You need them to combine for 60, as we've talked about. And Kyrie, through 2 games of this series, is averaging 14 points per game on 37% true shooting, which is just brutal. And he was able to win with his quickness in a few spots, but he also got blocked by Derek White one time that he beat him off the bounce. And so he wasn't extremely successful finishing in the paint, but more importantly, he's missing damn near all of his pull-up jumpers, and he's not getting a lot of easy stuff offensively. And what's even more problematic about that for Kyrie is that we've raved about his all-around impact throughout this postseason, which has never really been his calling card, but the level he's defended at, the level that he's been at as a playmaker has been really impressive. The problem is now he actually can get hunted defensively because this Boston team just has so many big wings, so many good offensive players. He doesn't hold up as well in this matchup. And now he's not drawing enough defensive attention to have a big playmaking impact like he could against OKC, for an example. So they need him to be great as a scorer, and he has been really bad as a scorer. So we can point fingers at a lot of dudes for Dallas who haven't been good enough, because there are plenty. But to me, the guy who is most disappointing is Kyrie, because everybody else, it's like their limitations are their limitations. You leave bad shooters open and they don't make shots. It's disappointing. It's not shocking. Kyrie struggling this much has been really costly for Dallas in this game, much more than game one, because this is the one where you had the opportunity and he did not seize it whatsoever.
Yeah, and I do want to commend Boston's defense one more time for just making life hell on Dallas, taking away all the easy stuff like we're talking about, easy corner opportunities for shooters, lobs over the top. Like you talk about that one lob to Derek Jones Jr., it's like, damn, man, that's like the one time Boston, didn't get set up. That was in transition when Boston's been really, really consistent and really.
Yeah, but they had him set a screen and they sent to it, Luka.
Really
it was in like semi-transition.
Well, that's what I'm saying is they weren't set up fully, and that's why they were able to exploit that. But when Boston has been able to set up and get their defense going, that's just never there. It's never an option. And they played Luka really physically. Again, Luka eats his, but he is working for these shots, man. Like when Drew and Jaylen Brown are on him, they are banging, man. It's really physical. And they're doing the same thing with Kyrie, man, just making him work. Don't do that.
I'm sorry. I was just a bit alarmed by the phrasing there.
They're just making these guys work, and that's what you do to great players. Is you just make life difficult on them. Kyrie, through 2 games, Carson, you mentioned the true shooting number. He hasn't hit a 3. He's 0 of 8 from behind the arc. It is crucial that he gets going from there. And the biggest issue really is that, we haven't had a spurt. We haven't had a stretch from Kyrie. And that's what his value has really been in these playoffs is, Luka, you do your thing for the first quarter, all right? You need me to pick up the slack in the second? I got you. All right, Luka, you can take the whole first half. I got you in the third quarter. It's when Kyrie can give you these microwave moments of, all right, we're stalling out. The engine's stalling here, and he gives you that little extra boost, that little extra kick at the most opportune time. And there are moments in this game. Doris mentions it on the broadcast. Hey, fourth quarter time, Kyrie hadn't been going. It's his time to eat, and we just haven't seen that at all from him. We just need signs of life. We need one of those stretches, and this is a game, again, that you just got to capitalize on. And that's the scariest aspect of this game to me. I don't want to beat a dead horse with this take, but the fact that you don't capitalize on poor shooting and Jayson Tatum having a bad scoring night, that's the recipe for a Dallas win. That's a huge component. Tatum stinks scoring the basketball. The Celtics lull themselves into shooting a bunch of threes, and they don't make them. They generated a ton of open looks. I'm actually not really mad at their shot quality or decision-making. All of the looks were basically open, but they were all from deep. The next 2 recipes, the keys to that recipe are Kyrie and Luka ball out. Luka balled out. Kyrie didn't. I agree. He's been the most disappointing player in these finals, and his job isn't – that's what I want to emphasize about this. Kyrie's job, it's not that it's not difficult. And he had a good first quarter. He had 8 points in the first quarter. He had 8 the rest of the game. We just need stretches. We need stretches of great Kyrie where it's 8 minutes of high-impact Kyrie just going out there and getting buckets. We don't need really an entire game. I trust Luka to give me 3 great quarters. Can Kyrie give me 1? And that really would make the difference. I just don't really see it getting easier for Kyrie. You look at all of these things. It's not that I don't think Kyrie's going to play better. I think Kyrie will have a better game 3 or game 4. It's just going to balance itself out. I think Kyrie's that great of a basketball player, but the opposition is not going to get any easier.
Yeah.
He's going to have Holiday. He's going to have Brown. He's going to have Derek White, and he's going to have Porzingis at the rim. Like, this is just a really tough defense to be matched up against. But I'm optimistic. Kyrie's a great player. They're going to go back home. That's key number one, though, for Dallas getting a basketball game, is that Kyrie just gives you more. And, again, I think he's a great player. I think going back home, he'll play a little better. But this great defense isn't going anywhere.
No, it's absolutely not. And this is a defense that is a really, really tough matchup for Dallas specifically, as we talked about, because of what they can do with Tatum, because of their switchability, because for Kyrie of the fact that you're dealing with the best defensive backcourt in basketball. It is, of course, a really tough draw, but he has to be significantly better. And I do think he'll be better going forward. The question is just, is that little too late? And the answer is probably yes, because again, when you are at this sort of overall talent deficit, it has to be about your two dudes being out of this world. I've talked about this as being, just in terms of peak, the best offensive backcourt that we've seen, because the shot creation, the shot making is so overwhelming. Normally, Kyrie has not lived up to the task whatsoever through these first two games. And so I think you put the blame more on him than anybody else. I do want to give some props to the Mavs supporting cast, because even though we're talking about how big the difference is between these two teams in that respect, that's always been very apparent on paper. And that's not like, oh man, these dudes are totally letting you down. Now, are there spots where dudes need to knock down wide open shots? Absolutely. Absolutely. But Boston having way better supporting cast players isn't necessarily like the fault of Dallas's. They traded for Kyrie. They had no assets at that point. They were just doing what they could. So we shouldn't be saying, oh, Derek Jones Jr., you need to be as good as Derek White. PJ, you need to be as good as KP. Like, obviously that's ridiculous. And I thought these guys did some good things. PJ's closeout attacking was really good, and he was physical as a driver. He got to his little floater game. Daniel Gafford had a significantly better game, and particularly in that second half, I loved how he attacked the glass. I thought his touch finishing was impressive, and particularly he has that stretch where back-to-back possessions, they go to him in the post against Jayson Tatum. He gets 2 easy buckets. That was some offensive punch that he hadn't provided in game one, and Lively really can't provide. He doesn't have that sort of physicality and that sort of touch around the rim. And Derek Jones Jr., I thought, did a better job of cutting and of doing some of the off-ball stuff, using his athleticism as he has throughout these playoffs. But again, that inability of a number of these supporting guys to hit those above the break threes is just absolutely killer. It's PJ Washington, Maxi Kleber, Josh Green, Derek Jones Jr., all of them. They combine for 1 of 13, and that just allows KP to play drop when he's involved, when one of them is being used as the screener, and he can ignore them, and they're bricking wide open looks, literally no contest, and it allows Boston to be more aggressive with their help in spots. So the impact that that has on this offense goes beyond just the box score. It goes beyond just the wasted possessions when they miss a shot, because it basically means that if Luka is going to use KP's man as a screener, well, he's kind of playing 1-on-2, and he's still been able to like get KP in space enough where he can just get a sliver of space for his pull-up shooting, and he's been able to create some good shots for himself. But that's a disadvantage, and you're kind of playing 4-on-5 offensively with the level that these dudes are at. So one of the biggest things to the Mavs having hope going forward is going to be figuring out who can make shots, who can bring offensive value, because after game one, I thought, let's see more Maxi Kleber, because when you play that jumbo lineup with him and PJ and a big, then you just have the ability to switch, particularly with KP on the floor, and not worry nearly as much about him just getting these super easy mismatches where he can shoot over these smalls, because 4 or 5 dudes on the court can guard him at least decently well. And Derek Jones Jr. had really struggled as a shooter in game one. But they both struggle mightily as shooters in this one. And at least Derek Jones Jr. is bringing you some value with his athleticism offensively. Also, Boston wasn't as deliberate about attacking those KP switches. They didn't do it with the same volume. And so you were able to get away with it a little bit more. Again, like when they switched Kyrie onto him, then mostly they went to KP a couple times and he got a couple easy buckets. But it's definitely disappointing, because although we can't hold these guys to the same standard, they're just not as good. Like, missing the wide open threes That's inexcusable.
It's killer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's killer. All first half, man. Especially in that first quarter, dude. Porzingis wasn't even going out to Maxi Kleba. He
Yeah.
owned Kleba in the first quarter, man. He stuffed him one time. Luka's creating these easy looks for him. He airballs a three that leads to the Jaylen Brown monster dunk in transition. You have to hit those shots. And like, I know that sounds like a simple key moving forward, but literally, which one of you guys is going to hit open threes? Because I really don't care at this point. If it's, I think you got to keep PJ out there and you try Derrick Jones Jr. as much as possible, but it's like, is it Josh Green? Is it Exum? Is it
Exum hit an above the break three. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, a Dallas Maverick made an above the break three.
Whoever it is, that guy's going to get burned. And Boston has so many of these multifaceted guys. You know, Dallas just doesn't. And I do think the other guy that if we're looking, I know you said this last show, and I agree. I think we got glimpses of it in this one. If there's going to be a third guy that steps up for Dallas, it's going to be PJ Washington. And I like what we got more when he would get those DY switches. He gets to a couple of floaters in this one. He's the guy that I'm looking at. And again, more of this is on Kyrie. Yes, the aggregate here deserves blame for just clanging open threes. That may get lost in the shuffle too. You know, they go, I think it was 6 of 26 from behind the arc in this game. Like, that's also inexcusable from Dallas's supporting cast. But again, man, it completely limits what this Dallas offense can do, the ceiling, right? We're going to load up on Luka. We're going to put, you said it perfectly, 4-on-5. You can't win like that. You have to punish the other team for playing like that. If Kristaps is going to drop, you got to punish them. And they just didn't do that. Again, the thing though, I'm encouraged that these things will balance out, right? I feel like we're that's what I said from game one, man. I was like, it's got to balance out, right? And that's what's scaring me about a potential sweep here from Boston. Like, damn, what if it just doesn't balance out and Boston just runs the table these next two games? But that's what I'm waiting on. I'm waiting for a great Kyrie game. I'm waiting for these guys to actually help Luka and knock down some shots. But it's concerning. Like, I don't know. There's very little like really encouraging things that I can take away from Dallas in these first two games. And there's a lot of areas where I feel like Boston could be even better.
100%.
Jayson Tatum, I think, could shoot the hell out of the ball next game and just go nuclear. We have yet to see a good game from Jayson Tatum scoring the basketball. You mentioned it just now. I think they all second half, I was like, well, one, why is Porzingis not out there? Two, when he was, I was going, damn, man, put him into action. Let's just get a small dude on Kristaps and run these boys out of the building. There are so many more areas where I think Boston can play even better. And there are very few areas where I really see like Dallas completely turning it around. That's where I'm at.
You said it pretty well. I do think there are areas Dallas can improve. These guys could make wide open threes at a better clip than they have. Kyrie can play better, but I do look at Boston, and you highlighted two of the key areas. Tatum can absolutely play better. KP can be on the floor more and be more involved. And the update is that there's basically zero concern. He didn't aggravate his calf injury at all. He says he's going to be out there game 3 no matter what. I would like to see him out there even more. I understand the conditioning, but it's like we're in the NBA Finals. He's a game-breaking player. I understand that to some extent you feel like you can target him a little bit more out of pick and roll than Horford, but I do feel like because of the fact that he's really not guarding the bigs very much, and so they're not getting behind him on the roll, like I'm not too worried about KP guarding those actions. And offensively, like he just brings such a different dimension with his mismatch attacking, and defensively with his rim protection as well, although Horford is clearly more switchable and has been good overall in this series. And then the other thing is just what we talked about, the fact that they were ice cold from deep, and you loved the shots that they got, and you loved how constantly that Dallas defense was in rotation. And Dallas defended the 3-point line better, I thought that they rotated better, but still Boston left a lot of meat on the bone in this one. So going forward for Dallas, I still think that we could see a little bit more trying to get PJ Washington involved when he has the Derek White matchup as a mismatch attacker. I think that we've seen what he can do as a driver there. He does have a physical advantage. I do wonder if we see more of Gafford going at Tatum. I did not expect that to be the case coming into the series. I did not think that would be something that they would try. But again, first possession of game one, what happened? Gafford drew a double there, and he was able to create an open three for a teammate. And then in this game, you have the sequence where he gets 2 easy buckets out of the post over Tatum. Like, Tatum holds up well there, and you wouldn't generally entrust Gafford with that sort of responsibility to create for himself, but he is bigger there and he does have good enough touch. It's definitely not something you can try with Lively, but I wonder if they go to that more at all. And then it really is going to be like, who's the dude you can trust out of this entire group? Because I don't think there's a big enough gap between Derrick Jones Jr. and Dante Exum and Josh Green, like, where you are just absolutely married to your rotations there. And Exum does bring a little bit of playmaking and ball handling and pushing in transition, and he's still bringing that defensive value. Like, if one of those dudes can step up, then that's the dude who I would be willing to play if I'm Dallas, and that's a dude who could make a difference. But ultimately, I still think they're going to struggle to create the easy offense that they're used to. They're not going to manufacture those same corner threes. They're not going to manufacture those same lobs. It's going to be about Luka and Kyrie being great in their matchups and the supporting cast just doing enough. And at this point, I am much more confident in Boston's formula. As I was beforehand, I felt pretty confident that Boston was going to win this series. And if they weren't, it would have to be because Luka and Kyrie were just so great. And Kyrie hasn't been that.
Yeah, and Dallas is scrambling and searching for answers, and I think Jason Kidd is going to look to his rotation next game to really, see who they're going to rock with. And what sucks about that is, again, the complete value that you're getting out of these Boston role players compared to the other guys. You're always sacrificing something, by subbing out one of these guys. If you take Derrick Jones Jr. out, you're losing something defensively if you're putting in an Exum or a Josh Green. They may bring you more shooting, but that's another defensive liability if you're running your starters. Right now, you have Luka, Kyrie, and Green or Exum. And I'm not saying Green's actually been all right on Tatum, and I'm not saying like that. It's just you're losing a lot of size, and there's another point. Green probably is defensively, but damn, he was.
I don't necessarily agree. I mean, I love Derrick Jones Jr. defensively, and he's super long and athletic, but he's 6'5" and slight. So, like, if you're worried about the mismatch attacking, there's not a massive difference there. Of course, there is a difference, and Derrick Jones Jr. is definitely better than these guys. It's just a question of, like, if he's missing all of his wide open threes, how much can you play him?
Yeah, and if
somebody else can make their wide open threes, which nobody else has yet.
and if that guy's hitting shots, I would be willing to play him more. And the final thing I'll say on that, I feel like a lot of people, if you're listening, would probably point to like Jaden Hardy and go, "Oh, well, he's clearly like their best offensive creator off their bench." He's a guy where like that defensive gap really is like man, this is not at all like a key to me to game 3 or anything. Like if you're in DEFCON, 4 mode and Luka and Kyrie are completely off and you need to, I don't know, switch the mojo up and get like 4 or 5 Jaden Hardy minutes here to see if he can get something going.
4 Jaden Hardy minutes. Calling it. That's the difference to the series.
That is not by any means the solution, but that's kind of the point, man. There is no easy solutions. Who the hell is going to hit a shot for the Dallas Mavericks? That's the big question heading into game 3. And we will soon find out. I don't know, man. I guess I'd probably give Exum a little more burn. I liked how he looked out there tonight. But, yeah, Dallas has got to be better in basically every facet, man. So you're sticking to your guns, man? You think it's going to be Boston in 6? You still think that Dallas gets 2 games?
No, probably not. I think that they probably win 1 of 2 at home, and I think Boston probably finishes it off in 5. I was confident in Boston coming into this series, but the gap through 2 games has been really quite big. And it's going to be tough for Dallas to find all of the answers that they need. I also think they should stop switching everything. With KP, I think it's a no-brainer because I think that Boston can do even more damage there. But even with, like, the Tatum Luka switch, that's a spot where I would just hedge and I would try to recover to Drew. And like coming into this series, I was like, you know what? I think that you would probably rather make Tatum win in that matchup than you would potentially concede an open pick and pop 3 to Drew Holiday. There's not a good answer there, but at this point, the problem is Luka can't contain Tatum off the dribble, and so you're conceding a wide open 3 anyways. In fact, you're conceding a more open 3 because now Tatum's really getting into the teeth of the defense, and you're just totally helping off of a really good shooter. that's been really, really exploitable. And I think that Dallas does need to mix things up there. This is a different series. This is a different offense that they're facing. And all the props to them, man. This Boston team showed a whole bunch of signs of being very, very special during the regular season. And it was not adequately appreciated. And throughout the playoffs, there was really very little credit given to them whatsoever. And I will say, as I have many times, I am not trying to claim whatsoever that I have been the dude throwing the Boston parade. I didn't pick them to win the title coming into the playoffs, and I had not been lauding them with praise throughout the first 3 rounds of the playoffs because they hadn't played anybody remotely close to their caliber as a basketball team. But coming into this series, Logan, I did make sure to say, let's understand the gap in talent here. Let's understand Boston is clearly the favorite here, and let's appreciate how great this team really is. And this has been a very convincing couple of games from them, even though this wasn't like a dominant win for them, because again, they're able to win while falling short in what makes them as lethal as anything as a basketball team, that being their 3-point shooting. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Naz Reid,
Logan, RIP, no longer in the playoff field. All right, guys, appreciate you tuning in. As always, we'll be back with a show before game 3. We'll talk some big picture stuff with this series and maybe whatever else pops into our head. But of course, we'll be back after that game as well. If you want more of our content, it is across our YouTube channel, all of our full shows, all of our video essays. I made one on KP after game 1, still relevant. He does a lot of the same stuff at a high level and will throughout this series. Luka, nope. Logan, congratulations, Logan. I just confused you with Luka Doncic. That's a fantastic player comp for you. Logan made a prospect breakdown about Matas Buzelis today that you can go ahead and check out. So that is across our YouTube channel. You can listen to the show across audio platforms. You can also follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh to see clips from the show and all of our trivia content, Twitter at @nerd_sesh. And you can join our Discord if you want to chat with the fellas, including one Matthew Spawnhour, who is very, very active in our Discord. And you can check out our merch at thevolume.com. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.